Alright guys, I'm back. For some reason my video cut off there, but anyways, as I was saying, this top picture with her and her husband, and the picture was taken in February 1933. And then down here for Daring Dude, Mending a Broken Nation, Abraham Lincoln, and he lived from 1809 to 1865. It says Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States in November 1860, but when he took office 5 months later, the states were no longer united. Conflict had been building for years between the northern and southern states over the issue of slavery, which Lincoln opposed. His election brought the issue to a boiling point. 11 southern states succeeded or separated from the Union and formed a new nation, the Confederate States of America. So those were the southern states. They were called the Confederate States. Lincoln was now president of a nation divided. He threw himself into making it whole again, leading the country through one of its worst periods, the Civil War, which cost more than 600,000 lives. Lincoln not only preserved the Union, he also abolished slavery and helped shape the modern economy. So when it says he opposed slavery, that means he was against slavery. So that's partly why the Civil War took place. All right. Next, we have women in the White House, phenomenal first ladies. And first ladies are the wives of presidents. So if they were a president, if their husbands were a president, then they were considered the first lady. So we have up here, it says presidents get all the credit, but did you know that many of their right-hand women were inspiring leaders in their own right? Meet fabulous first ladies who acted as their president's most trusted advisors, brought overlooked causes to national attention, and proved that White House wives can be a powerful force for change. Okay, next we have the unofficial advisor Abigail Adams, and she lived from 1744 to 1818. So in 1797, Abigail Adams was the first lady to have held a government position. 20 years earlier, while the United States was fighting for its independence from Great Britain, the Massachusetts Colony General Court had appointed her to question other Massachusetts women to find out who were patriots and who were still loyal to the British Crown. In her spare time, she had melted down pewter tableware to make bullets for Revolutionary War soldiers. But Adams' most important role was an unofficial advisor to her husband, President John Adams. She wrote him hundreds of letters offering her opinions on political and social issues, among them arguing that women should be equal to men in the eyes of the law. He wasn't persuaded, but those letters are some of the earliest documents on women's rights. Life of the party, Dolly Madison, 1768 to 1849 is when she lived. She looks like that. She was the first lady who was born a Quaker, which is a strict religious group that believed women should be quiet and reserved, stay home, and wear muted colors such as gray and brown. But Madison was not your average Quaker. This clever first lady became famous for her social functions, engineering them as an opportunity to help her husband, President James Madison, meet powerful people. She was the life of the party, wearing flashy clothes like bright yellow dresses and head turbans. She also adorned the White House with American-made pieces that still give the home of the president its famous look today. Dolly Madison is also known for one of the most quick-thinking and courageous First Lady acts of all time. Find out what she did on page 26. We'll read about her again later. Next is Michelle Obama. She's a modern role model, and she was born in 1964 and is currently still living. It says, this writer and lawyer campaigned alongside her husband, President Barack Obama, during his run for the presidency. writing her own speeches and often speaking without notes when political opponents criticized her opinions. She developed a reputation for calmly sticking to her beliefs. "When you're campaigning, there will always be criticism," she said in 2008. "I just take it in stride, and at the end of the day, I know it comes with the territory." Barack Obama was elected the nation's first black president in 2008, and Michelle Obama became the first African-American First Lady. She has been an advocate for education at home and around the world, working to inspire young people across America to continue with their education past high school and to help girls around the world go to and stay in school. She made it her goal to help Americans get healthier, creating the Let's Move program to put an end to childhood obesity. And Mrs. Obama was launched along with Dr. Jill Biden, wife of U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, the initiative joining forces aimed at supporting veterans, service members, and their families. Then we have conservation champion Lady Bird Johnson. She lived from 1912 to 2007. This nature-loving First Lady, wife of President Lyndon Baines Johnson, planted flowers and trees along roadsides to make cities and highways more beautiful. She championed conservation, encouraging America to protect its plants and wildlife. She was also an outspoken supporter of the civil rights movement, famously boarding a train called the Lady Bird Special in 1964 to tour 8 southern states locked in racial turmoil and to make speeches supporting African Americans' rights. She spoke out for equal rights for women, too, calling it the right thing to do. In 1977, she was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award a United States citizen can earn. And then we have Daring Dude, father of the country, George Washington, who lived from 1732 to 1799. No, George Washington wasn't a first lady, but he was another kind of famous first. He was the nation's first president. Before that, he was a general in the American Revolutionary War. On Christmas night, 1776, General Washington led his force of roughly 2,400 Continental Army soldiers across the freezing Delaware River, dodging floating chunks of ice and paddling through bone-chilling sleet. His troops were dressed in rags and weary from defeat. Weary means kind of like weak and very tired. But General Washington was desperate for a victory in the war for independence from England and thought a surprise attack via this dangerous route might catch the enemy off guard. He was right. Washington's victory was just one of many examples of Washington's trademark daring and leadership skills. When the war ended, he was the founding fathers' unanimous choice of the country's first president. Crowned royal rulers, Elizabeth I. Married to her country. When Elizabeth I took the throne as the Queen of England in 1558, she had a tough job ahead of her. England's royals were regularly overthrown, imprisoned, and beheaded. Her country was fighting with France, and the war was quickly eating up the royal gold. On the top of that, England was embroiled in an internal battle as its two religious groups, the Roman Catholics and the Protestants, clashed. The ruler before Elizabeth, her sister, Bloody Mary, had only made matters worse by ordering hundreds of Protestants to be burned at the stake. Undaunted, the 25-year-old royal clapped the crown on her head and met England's problems face to face. She ended the war with France, initiating an era of peace that lasted mostly of her reign. She also supported creative minds like author William Shakespeare, and the arts flourished under her rule. Unlike her sister, Elizabeth also supported religious freedom. Many of Elizabeth's advisors wanted the queen to get married and have a child to take over the throne, but she didn't want to share her power with a husband or lose it to him completely. Now, why do you think she would have lost it to him completely if she would have gotten married? It could have been because back in her time period that she was the queen, men were looked as more superior. And so if she would have married a husband, he probably could have taken her position with him being the superior sex, being a man. And it says, from 1558 until her death in 1603, Elizabeth ruled alone in a world that was dominated by men. Through it all, Elizabeth was confident in her ability to lead as well as any male ruler could have, and she wasn't afraid to say so. "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman," she said, "but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England, too." Under Elizabeth's rule, England became a major European power in politics, commerce, and the arts. Her 45-year reign was a time of peace and prosperity, named the Elizabethan Age after the woman who made it happen. So she was the Queen of England for 45 years. And a quote by her says, "Better beggar, woman, and single than queen and married." Elizabeth I. And then her fearless facts: she was born September 7th, 1533 in Greenwich, England, and she died March 24th, 1603, Richmond, England. Her occupation was the queen, obviously, and her boldest moment was taking the throne in a tumultuous time. The Trung sisters, they fought for freedom. Trung Trác and Trung Nhi were born 2 millennia ago in a small village in northern Vietnam. According to legend, their mother taught them, but not in the art of cooking and keeping house. She trained her daughters in the art of war. For 150 years, Vietnam had been suffering under the rule of the much larger and more powerful country of China. In the year AD 36, the Han Dynasty controlled Vietnam. Dinh governed the region where the Trungs lived. He demanded bribes, raised taxes on necessities like salt, and even taxed Vietnamese pheasants for fishing in the rivers. The Trung sisters, now grown up, decided they had had enough of living under Dinh's oppressive rule. So Trung Trác and her husband secretly plotted with local leaders to organize a revolt. But Dinh got word of that they were plotting and had Trung Trac's husband killed. Instead of giving up, Trung Trác and her sister came out swinging. They waged an attack against the Chinese that was fierce enough to kick them out of Vietnam. Dinh himself was so scared of the dueling duo that he shaved off his hair to disguise himself and ran away. The Trung sisters ruled for 2 years, fiercely defending their country against the Chinese. But eventually, they lost the battle. The Vietnamese still honor the bravery and sacrifice of the Trung sisters every year on the anniversary of their deaths. And it says the Vietnamese still honor the bravery and sacrifice of the Trung sisters. And then down here, their fearless facts. They were born CAAD 12, Aussie, Vietnam, and died CA 43 in Vietnam. And their occupation was revolutionaries and rulers. The boldest moment was fighting for Vietnam's independence from China. Now, on this page, as you could kind of see, there was some hard words that were just names. Like down here in the Fearless Facts, the name of where they were born in Vietnam. If it's just a name, you can kind of just guess at what it says. If it's a name, it's not something that takes away from the importance of what is being said. So when you get stuck on a name, when you're taking a test or anything like that, you don't have to spend a lot of time hung up on a name that you don't know. Just pronounce it the best that you can and move on, and you'll still be able to comprehend the information the same as if you were able to pronounce the name correctly. So that's just kind of a little tip for if you do get stuck on a name. All right, so that was page 15. We're going to stop there for the reading, and we're going to move over to the questions. So you should be on page 193, and the questions look like this, page 193. Okay, and I already have some of the answers written out here, so I'm gonna cover them up while we discuss them. But just a tip, remember, above each number, it will tell you what page number each answer is on. So for number 1, we're gonna be looking on page 12 for this answer. So our first question says, why was Abigail Adams an important figure in American history? So just like we do in class, let's go ahead and flip back to page 12 in our book and find the part where it talks about Abigail Adams. Okay, so right here, we can reread that. So go ahead and take a moment to reread that. And as you are rereading that, remember we are looking for, why was Abigail Adams an important figure in American history? So why was she so important? And I'll give you a minute to write down what you think, and then we'll go over it. All right, now if I'm moving too fast for you, you can always pause the video and take your time to think and then press play again. But let's talk about this. So we want to know why Abigail Adams is the important figure in American history. So if we look back through here, it says she was the first lady to have held a government position. So that's one reason why she's probably pretty important. She was the first lady. So she was John Adams' wife when he was president, and she was the first lady, and she was the first to hold a government position. And then if you read through here, it says, but Adams' most important role was an unofficial advisor to her husband, President John Adams. So what was her most important role? It tells you right here. She was an unofficial advisor to her husband. And she wrote hundreds of letters about her opinions on political and social issues, and how women should be equal to men. So if you go back to your question page, you can